What is going on, y'all? KMBest here. As we all know, hopefully, there is not a patch until the 29th of this month. So join me in Fantasyland as I present what I would have done if I were in charge of Marvel Snap's OTA balance patches. Let's see if I can fix this Thanos-heavy metagame. Of course, we are starting with the Mad Titan himself, that is Thanos. I am going to be chopping 2 power off of him rather than examining larger reworks. One of the things I noticed playing both with and against this deck is that it stresses your board space and your verticality in individual lanes in a real way. Having Thanos be a card that starts always in your hand and can effectively play as a 5/12 indestructible a lot of the time if you're doing well means that you have a lot less of those struggles with verticality because you're able to use your turn 5 on 12 power in one lane where it really matters, alongside potentially the threat of that going to 22. I want to maintain Thanos being about Thanos. In large part, when I focused on making this video, I wanted to talk about what I wanted to take away from certain decks and focus on making better cards that did not necessarily promote unpleasant strategies. Fundamentally, I think Thanos is roughly pleasant. If there is something wrong with him, it's that he is a powerful shell for reactive tech cards that make the game unpleasant. The fact that there is a Thanos deck playing Shang-Chi and Red Guardian and Mobius and Cosmo and Enchantress all in the same deck, that's the problem. It's that it's a good shell for those cards. And what makes it a good shell for those cards is its general purpose power and the way it can apply itself to providing the compensatory game actions taken that allow those cards to only be played when they're useful. In large part, what this means, in simple terms, is I want to make this guy weaker in a way that allows it to compensate less for the fact that it's running 8 million reactive tech cards. And furthermore, I do not view this as a Thanos issue so much as it just so happens to be Thanos that is the shell for those cards that make games unpleasant. Ergo, targeting not the construction of Thanos, but explicitly targeting his power level is the direction I want to go with it. Sam Wilson, Captain America, another card that largely has the effect of compensating you, i.e. providing a lot of power in game actions and utility on his own, which allows you to devote more of the slots in your deck to tech cards. He is notably problematic in Thanos, where he represents a free discount on Mockingbird, Thanos, Mockingbird, Sam Wilson. Those are the cards that, in my opinion, enable the tech build of Thanos more than anything else. I think Strange Supreme very close to that list, but I still think those three are the offenders, as it were. I am more fine with Strange Supreme existing in that context as a compensator or a card that allows this deck to exist than I am with Sam. So for Sam, I think one of the major issues with him is that when you play him early, he's just too big for what he is. He has so many little synergy tie-ins that you don't need him to be a 2/7, which he is if you play him on 2. There's no reason for that. He has the free guy that starts on the board. There is synergy tie-ins with Ongoing, with Mockingbird. Sam is run very often in large part because of those synergies. Synergies with Miles Morales, synergies with Kraven, a bunch of different stuff that will not change if you take some explicit power off of Sam. For this reason, the change I have gone for here is moving his buff to be lower power. That means when you play him on 2, you get a 2/5, not a 2/7. I think that's probably a good place to start, but if you wanted to be even meaner, you could leave him at 2/2 and do this exact same change, making him at maximum a 2/4. I think there's a very real argument that he has so many synergies that he doesn't need to have an on-rate stat line as well. I have chosen to keep him at on-rate if you try to play him, but take off the fact that he is randomly also the biggest 2-drop in the game a lot of the time. I think this is a card that is a useful, fun, exciting piece. I like what he's done for the ongoing deck. I like that Ongoing is a strategy. I like that people are playing Spectrum. I want to keep that around. I like that a lot of his power is wrapped up in his synergies, and I want to keep that power wrapped up in his synergies. I just want to take some numbers off of him. He doesn't need to have all these synergies and also have all these numbers. I would aim my nerfs at the numbers. Here's where I fear we may get into controversial territory. This is a nerf to Juggernaut. Now, you might think, well, you're giving him 2 power and making him cost 1 more. What makes you so sure that's a big nerf? The reason I think Juggernaut sees so much play is that you are able to play him late in games, specifically on turn 6, and also devote power elsewhere. It's possible this ends up making him stronger. I think it is very, very unlikely, however. Now, the one thing that gives me pause about this is that you can Zabu this. Being able to Zabu this seems incredibly unpleasant. Being able to Surge this seems incredibly unpleasant, and it does seem like it might just be giving him some extra power. Those are my only worries, but frankly, I would consider both of those cards that might show up in a future video like this when we talk about stuff like this. In fact, Zabu only barely missed being in this video, in large part because his usage has fallen off fairly greatly recently, but don't think that means I've forgotten about him. As far as Juggernaut, my base premise is, as long as we make his normal use case worse, I think we will be doing a favor to the metagame. This guy has played as 3 Energy Goliath for way too long. You put him in a lane, you know you're going to win that lane unless they fill the lane up. It sucks, it's boring, it's really not a fun play pattern, and I think the larger part about it is he's balanced at 3-3 as if his power actually matters to what he's doing in any game ever. Like, obviously, Marvel Snap is a very complex game, power always matters, but Juggernaut is so like, oh, he has this really strong effect, so we'll give him a small power, and it's like, I don't really feel like anything short of 3-0ing him would change how he plays at 3 cost. He just kind of is what this is. I think an alternate version here would be like 3-0 or 3-1, but I personally feel like if you want to maintain the feel of the character and not just like totally brutally murder a card, I think you end up looking at 4-5 or something in that vein as a much more preferable option because it taxes you much more heavily on how to win that second lane. The more overarching thing I want to get across here is effects like this that very often say win a lane need to cost more. And I think the only downside of making him cost more is that there's a card that makes 4 costs cost less. Like, maybe we could 5-8 him or something like that to avoid the Zabu thing, but fundamentally what I'm getting at is 3 is too cheap for what this card does, full stop. Okay, now that we're done taking aim at the top of the metagame, we've hit every deck playing Sam Wilson, which is half of them, every deck playing Thanos, which is 20% of them, and a lot of Surfer decks playing Juggernaut, which is probably another 20%. So let's talk about what I would improve. I think buffs are one of the most exciting things about Marvel Snap. And when I originally concepted this video, I was like, it'll be so easy to find cards to buff. And I won't fall into the second dinner trap of just doing a bunch of +1s. Oh my god, I'm going to be the greatest designer of all time. And then I actually got in the trenches and I started looking around. And it turns out that a lot of the cards that aren't played very much, a lot of the cards that aren't very good, have very good reasons for not being reasonable buff targets, whether that ranges from unpleasant play patterns or being explicitly starter cards. Things like White Queen, I think, for example, you could 3-5 and it would be good, but that's a starter card, and I don't really think that that's the kind of thing that a video like this should ignore. I don't want to sit here and fully just sort of, Monday morning quarterback the OTAs. I know they have good reasons for not wanting to buff starter cards. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they don't, so I tried to keep those to a minimum. By the same token, it'd be probably very easy to make something like Black Widow a much better card, but would that be good for the metagame? Would you want to create more of these Shang-Chi style cards that stop your opponent from playing cards? So for this section, for the most part, what I focused on were cards that encourage people to try strategies that do not involve interacting with your opponents in negative ways, i.e., not a lot of stuff that's like buffing a Shang-Chi or buffing an Enchantress or whatever. Despite the fact that I think you could get away with that, I don't think people want that. I think that one of the main dissatisfaction points with Thanos is the vast amount of tech in that deck and how it can just say, actually, I have the one card that stops you. Ho, 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 ho. I focused on trying to create strategies to build around, strategies to aim at, and making these cards more playable. So with that, Penny Parker, what I would do is move Spider to 3/5, and then I would make it have vision text instead of only next turn, meaning it would be able to move every turn. I think that's kind of an awesome way to go about this. It makes it a very interesting priority tool. You can use it to either acquire or throw priority. You are investing 5 energy over 2 turns. That's about as much as a vision. And I think on the whole, one of the things that Penny Parker and Infinity Ultron have taught me is that the payoffs for these cards that take up multiple turns need to be stronger than we would otherwise think. Penny Parker, on the whole, might even deserve a larger look at a rework entirely, because I don't think energy is the right payoff for her, but assuming we are keeping that, I want people to feel like they're getting something valuable. And moving on turn 4 is basically useless because we need those moves on the final turn of the game. We need to be able to bank that move and then move our 8 power guy on the final turn of the game, because that's when our power really starts to matter. And so maybe even you don't give it vision text, maybe you give it Nightcrawler text. It gains the ability to move once a game. It doesn't have to move right now. But either way, I think this card could be a fair bit stronger, and allowing it to be an exciting card would be a cool thing to do. Pretty simple +1 power buff here to Pixie. Once again, I am focused on cards that not necessarily create new archetypes, but just generally encourage a specific play pattern. Pixie is probably the one that has the roughest of these sort of play patterns to play against, so I get why they'd be reticent to do this. But I just want people to be trying more engines. That was sort of the ethos of what I tried to put together here is, what can we do to make there be more diversity in engines in Marvel Snap, as opposed to diversity of answers? We already have a million answers. The Thanos deck is full of them. I want there to be different ways to ask the questions. So making Pixie a 2/3 as opposed to something you have to go out of your way to play a below rate body on to justify some nebulous potential upside later, which might not even be upside, seems like a really easy change to make for me. Now, granted, play pattern here, kind of problematic. Obviously, it sucks to get like 1-cost gores dropped on you, but much like Mr. Negative, the fact that there are very clear counterplay options to this makes me not worried at all about putting power into it. At the end of this month, Marvel Snap will be releasing Zorn, a 2/3 that moves 3 and 4 cost cards. There are currently exactly 0 4-cost payoffs for Zorn, barring a, vaguely hilarious Phoenix Force reviving multiple man kind of thing. I'm not really seeing it with why they would do that without a 4-cost move payoff, but I know this man, Spider-Man 2099, released at 4-cost, and I feel like there's no reason not for him to go back to 4-cost, especially if there's a card coming out which might actually synergize and explicitly want a 4-cost move payoff. Now, granted, this guy's payoff is kind of the most interacting in a bad way that the move deck can get, where move is typically focused on building its own sandcastle, making its own power high. This guy does interact and destroy opposing cards, and that could be a risk. But that said, I think if you're making a card that synergizes and almost explicitly tells you, go find 4-cost move payoffs to put in my deck, I'd really rather there actually be a 4-cost move payoff than have to dig through various Phoenix Force things to find one. Technically, this is a +1/-1 buff, but not really because of the way this card works. I'm just fairly interested in seeing if a 5/12 is playable. I just kind of want to know. Would people put, like, 5/12 Abomination in their deck? Would you play a 5/12 Black Panther? Because I don't really think Black Panther is a problematic card in any meaningful way, nor do I think that this meaningfully impacts the combo-style Black Panther decks, which are always going to get to some stupid level of power when they work anyway, and then die to every piece of interaction when they don't work. Going to 12 here doesn't really change anything. It just makes this card more generally cool and interesting. It makes the numbers be bigger, but functionally, I feel like if you're doing like Symbiote, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Zola, you're winning the lanes that card goes into regardless. It doesn't matter what the number on the original Black Panther is. You don't care about that in the slightest. When you're wonging your Black Panther, it's not like you're going to be like, oh man, instead of my original 72 power, I only got 64. Like, that's still going to win the lane. What are we talking about here? So what this does is make him better in a normal sense. It just makes him a better generic 5 cost. And frankly, this is a card I think people forget that was a season pass card. Maybe the first season pass card. I think it might have been like December of that year or November. Miles was technically the first, but we were released in the middle of the Miles season. So I think Black Panther might have been the first season pass card, or maybe he was the season pass when the official store released, and so he got overshadowed by all those other cards coming out at the same time. But the point is, he's basically never been good outside of Maximalist, very interactable with combo decks. I just kind of want to see if like we can make T'Challa a playable, good on rate card. I think that would be a cool thing for him to be. And I think it would be a nice little, maybe you can attempt to infuse your good on rate stuff with weird combo stuff. Who knows? I did try to stay away from Series 1 cards. I did not succeed in this instance. I want to buff Claw. The last time I did a video on this, I was like, they should buff Claw, and I suggested this buff. And what they did was make him go +8 and keep him at 4, and that ended up proving problematic with various Mystique things and also the original Agent Venom, and I don't really think it would be problematic now. I don't really think this card is problematic now. But what I liked about that version of Claw was it was just a solid 5-drop that like played for multiple lanes. I think that's a cool dynamic to have in Marvel Snap. What I don't like about a lot of ongoing stuff right now, or what I should say, what presents a balance risk about a lot of ongoing stuff right now, is largely the duplication of ongoing effects. Ergo, I think it's a little bit safer to put the power on Claw here rather than the power in the ongoing. I realize this is breaking 2 of the general rules that I set out for the beginning of this section. Rule number 1, stay away from starter cards. Rule number 2, don't just do +1 power type stuff. I get it. However, the Pirates Code, it's more guidelines than actual rules. Again, technically a +1, not functionally a +1. At this point, I am very confident that Beta Ray Bill is where a lot of the fun of the Thor deck is. And I think you'll know this if you've played any of the Thor deck. You play Thor, okay, +6, that's cool. You play Beta Ray Bill, it just activates a different part of your brain. Even though Thor, when you're like duplicating him with a Misery or whatever, you're getting that double Mjolnir, it's just going to be like a cool little fun little thing. I kind of think I would prefer Beta Ray Bill get the power, and then in a compensatory move, take a power off of Stormbreaker, because functionally, Stormbreaker's not the fun part of the card. Give the power to the fun part of the card. The fun part of the card is when you go, haha, I'm doubling all my stuff. 7, oh my god, 14, oh my god, 28, oh my god, 56. That's the fun part. The fun part of the card is not, check out my 0-3. Not fun, not cool, don't put the power there. Power goes in the fun part. That is where the fun is on this card. 4/7 Beta Ray Bill. Bring my boy back. In concert with this, I do think that it's possible we might want to look at a buff to normal Thor. I think that guy could be a 3/5 pretty reasonably and not really feel bad about it. I still remember when he was almost a pretty solid on-rate 3. I don't really think there's a reason for him not to be, especially if this archetype is going to be a cool thing to exist. Although, I do see a potential worry that this archetype is not actually a cool thing to exist. That said, I do think it'll likely be an upside thing. Strong Guy is a really interesting piece, in my opinion, because he used to be one of the strongest cards in the game when he was exactly what this would make him again. A 2/3 with an ongoing that gives him +6 when you had, actually at the time, it was 0 cards in hand, I believe. But the point I'm trying to make here is, this is a card that has been absolutely terrible. This is a card that does deserve a little bit more. I am definitely not biased. Please pay no attention to the fact that my username in-game was Strong Guy, and that I have ordered a print of Strong Guy to be put in this empty space behind me once I am done tilt painting it. This is absolutely not a homer pick under any circumstances. I can't believe you would not only believe that of me, but accuse me of such bias. Frankly, you should feel bad for even thinking it. I tried to stay away from like reworks and things of that nature, but there is one card that I really would like to see be better, and that is Sabertooth. So I have done one small rework. In my opinion, the biggest problem with Sabertooth is his cost. He tends to be worth it if you can get him onto the board. The problem is that costing 3 is so incredibly unpleasant and bad. So what I did was I dropped him to 2, and he gains a power and then loses a cost. Effectively, what that means is over multiple destroys, he becomes what he is now with the potential to get bigger, but he's easier to actually play into your destroy curve. And I think that's sort of the important thing. On turn 3, destroy decks almost always want to be destroying. And I think that that makes 3-cost Sabertooth almost a non-starter, despite the fact that, again, when you have him running, he's a very powerful piece to have access to. So making him smaller and making him a little bit more of a card that you can get out there on turn 2 and then blow him up on 3, and then it's much easier to weave him in once you've blown him up on 3. All of that makes more sense to me, plus it makes him a much better mirror to Wolverine. So that is my take on what I would do to fix Marvel Snap. Honorable mention, I really wanted to put Zabu and the Hood on this list. I don't think I can justify it at the current play rates and win rates of them. I think it would be a little bit iffy for me to talk about those cards in this context instead of like focusing on the Thanos of it all, right? But I do think that Zabu and the Hood are like, keep an eye on these. If I ever do another one of these videos, expect to see me say, Zabu to 1/1, Hood Demon to 1/5. You're just going to see that. I think that's sort of more a holdover from the metagame and Agamotto release month, but I do believe that those cards have shown the potential, nay, the ability to be problematic, and they're only being held back right now by things that are even more problematic, so I would keep an eye on them for sure. As far as everything else goes, thank you so much for watching. I really am interested to see what the response to this will be. Let me know if you have any suggested changes, what your thoughts are on the changes I proposed, my reasoning behind them, and if there's anything you'd like to focus on. But please do keep in mind, I really did focus on buffing cards that don't suck to play against. And so these are mostly cards that are focused on, building your own sandcastle and not kicking other sandcastles over. So I really don't want to look at the comments and be people saying like, why didn't you talk about Baron Mordo or Black Widow? It's like, you know why I didn't talk about Baron Mordo or Black Widow, and it's because I don't want those cards to be good. So all of that is to say, thank you so much for watching. I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.